I'm Matt Braunger. This might help.
I am not a doctor.
This might help.
I'm not a professional.
Let's have fun. This honestly is a good time.
Honestly, I got no idea what I'm doing. What's going on? Who are you?
I'm Matt Braunger. This might help. The podcast.
Hey, welcome to This Might Help, the only advice podcast that has ever mattered or ever will, as we all agreed throughout time and infinity. I have had a great time doing the show. It gives me a certain role to play in my life, but I love having people on who I've never met. But in this case, that's not necessarily true. I've met half of this band. I've not met both of them, but I'm excited to have Living Tombstone on. How are you guys?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Well, man. So
Yeah.
Sam used to
Surviving.
work at the Stand. Yeah.
I
in New
did.
York.
Yeah, I was a door guy at a comedy club.
That's how I knew you or know you. I couldn't figure out like what I knew you from, but Yoav, we've not met. Nice to meet you. How are you,
Nice to
sir?
meet you too. Yeah, very good, pretty good. Doing pretty swell. Despite the current circumstances everyone's in. I don't need to mention
Yeah.
that. There's enough stories.
Of
about
course, but it bears repeating. It's one of those
Yes.
things you can't not mention, especially when you're talking about not that we talk about current events in the show or anything, but what the big thing about this show is it's basically just like how we're keeping ourselves afloat and how fun things like comedy, like music, two things you guys do, kind of give us treats. One big piece of my philosophy is that we need treats in life. You don't have to necessarily live on them, but they're very necessary. Like, are you guys doing okay right now? How is everything, generally speaking?
Yeah,
Good question.
we're doing all right. I think we're bouncing off the walls a little bit. Yoav and I,
Yeah.
within about 2 weeks from each other, reached both the man bun and mohawk stage of quarantine, respectfully.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Great.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I like talking to younger dudes that are doing fun things, and what you guys you're doing. Well, first off about your band, I'd never heard your stuff, and it's awesome. First off, I should say, and also
Thank you.
Thanks.
because I just like having people on the show who are doing cool things and seem like cool people. But you were recommended by one of the guys who work on this show, Max. He was just like, "Oh, do you know the Living Tombstone?" I was like, "No." And so then I looked it up and was like, "Oh, okay." It's like basically, would you call it electronica via rock music channels, or how would you? I was listening to it going like, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this, not to, have to define everything, but I'll just let you talk.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I get asked the question a lot. I probably get asked the question more than Yoav does, because Yoav is the one who sort of founded the act 9 years ago, and I'm the guy who
Right.
joined it later.
Oh,
So
man.
I feel like I get asked the question a lot, like, what kind of music do you guys make? And a lot of the time I just I answer young. It's
Sure.
young music. I feel like they're past a generational line. Genre starts to not really exist so much anymore. And I feel like even in the first place, it was so much a designator just to label different types of radio, like what a different radio station would play.
Well,
Right.
And as we've gone away from radio and into streaming, genre doesn't matter so much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old man compared to you both, but when I was growing up in Portland, Oregon, I remember, there's a lot of experimentation in terms of music, and one thing that would always kind of trip anyone up is like, okay, well, what do they sound like? And I remember like one of the bands that I hit the wall on in terms of describing was like They Might Be Giants, where you're
Yeah.
like, what do they sound like? And like, I don't know, man, you got to listen. There's nothing I can tell you that it'll sound like this or like that. And that's kind of what I dug about your guys' sound, that I know, I didn't do a ton of research on you because I just wanted to talk. But I know you guys you've done a lot of video game work. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We have
like
a
ton.
lot of love for video games and making songs about video games because a lot of the roots came from, besides, the love of music and everything, is that
Mhm.
because you're on the internet, you're more likely to find a lot of niches, like
Yeah.
people loving video games, one example, or shows, or or different kinds of things that people just love. And especially because on internet allows you to have these forums, very specifically. And that's
Right.
how,
If you like a show
yeah.
or a video game, you can find each other. Everyone who likes that show.
Yeah.
And you can find a lot of people who, besides loving these shows, like that's what inspired me, is that I saw people making art and music based on stuff that they love. And I saw how people found musicians this way because they showed their appreciation first. And I mean, you mentioned they might be giants, but I know that part of their success is that, well, they didn't necessarily make songs about these things, but their songs were super popular among different forums and groups and different people talking about them, using these songs as references for stuff they make. And that's how like the internet just thinks a lot. And that's how the Living Tombstone started, just because of this mentality.
Yeah, I have a cousin who writes video games, and he's written books about video games. And
Oh, cool.
I was never like, I just don't play a lot of them. I definitely appreciate it. I do see it as a massive art form. It's undeniable, that it is. In fact, he and I wrote a TV show about a video game production team that was at Showtime, and then they decided not to pick it up. But then they might be. Then It's Always Sunny guys. They did basically almost the same show, but it's just like it was just parallel things. But it was interesting. He and I met in adulthood, and because our parents are my mother and his father are cousins, and so long story long, he at one point was out having dinner with my parents and me when I was visiting home, and he made us play video games. Where he was like took us back to his apartment. I was like, look, you have to understand why this is important. And it was just kind of like, whoa. And it had been so long since I'd actually engaged myself in one. And writing that show with him, I understood how much music is as big a part of it as the visual aspect. It's massive, because you're inhabiting another entity's entire existence. And so you're hearing, the thematic fiber of it has got to be expressed. So it's one of those things where I'm sure you guys have had some people be like, oh, music about video games and in video games, who cares? They're not real.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I balk at that, because that's like negating art as a whole because you don't like it or don't understand it,
Totally. And, we existed kind of in the fringe for a very long time because of that too, where, the act was very popular and had a lot of fans and views and whatever, but there was just absolutely no attention, even like a hostility to attention from like the mainstream music industry.
Yeah.
And this is, Yoav made a song in 2014 about a game called Five Nights at Freddy's, and that charted on Billboard. Like it hit like number 12 on the dance charts. And there was still just complete like, but that's internet video game music. I feel like it's probably what people felt like writing comics in the 50s or 60s, where there was just this sense of just like, but is that art? Come on. But it's a form of mass media and pop art.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. This, I wouldn't even say niche you've created or whatever, but I like how you guys kind of have a fundamental idea of what it is and are unapologetic about it, which is how when people call in, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people who call in and are like, they're very unsure about themselves in a certain thing, but I kind of want to shake them and be like, what you love, do that thing. Don't be ashamed of it, especially because thankfully there's such a larger acceptance of whatever these communities are that we're all embracing.
Totally. And I think there's been kind of a pivot recently in culture from the sort of guilty pleasure thing from ironic enjoyment to unironic enjoyment. I feel like unironic enjoyment is the new ironic enjoyment. What was, like 10, 15 years ago saying like, oh my God, isn't this terrible? Isn't that great? Now people, I think a great example is like the response to the Cats movie last year. Or the beginning of this year, where everyone was like, this is a train wreck. And I earnestly love it. Like it's almost like a callback to the popularity of like camp. where people are saying, yeah, that's the point, is that it's a mess. And that's what I love about it. Not kind of this thing where you have to plant your tongue firmly in cheek and be like, I know, isn't this terrible? Do you want to watch it? Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
There's no more sarcasm to it.
Well, and it's the thing that comes to mind for me was I remember going to this karaoke bar that we used to go to, and there's this woman named Nancy, and I still will say the name Nancy, and I'll laugh to myself because she unapologetically put in dozens of songs to the point where the karaoke DJ is like, next up, Nancy, it's just that thing, and she always reacted like, what me, like as if someone else put the song in. And I don't know if she was mentally imbalanced or if that was like a long game joke she was doing, but it got me every time. I'm like, this is this thing that she's done it to death and people hate her here. But it's like, I am her biggest fan because it's so ridiculous that she just keeps doing this and doing. I guess what I'm saying is, enjoyment is enjoyment.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Really?
Totally. And that's definitely where we land on it. And it's part of why I think there are other people who do this kind of thing that we do, where there's a lot of sort of fandom involved in the art. And a lot of those people, when they go kind of mainstream, they have this urge to distance themselves and act super ashamed of what they used to do. Yeah. And we're totally not about that. We're like, yeah, like we had a good time and so did you.
Yeah, that's it. Like, so Yoav, were you, how did you get into music? Or where did it kind of begin for you?
It's interesting because it's like we always talked about the internet up until now. It's also started because of the internet for the most part, because I loved the idea of music a lot, but I was really terrible at like trying to teach myself piano, guitar, or anything of that sort. And I thought that always discouraged me from thinking that maybe music is not for me, because I thought you have to make music because you have to perform it. And I'm like, and then I realized on the internet that people have discovered that now you can just download software and just like try to make music like that. And because of this, like internet communities talking about how to use it. And I remember, because of how, it was used, obviously there was already musicians using computers, of course, but not to the point that now you make it all by yourself in your bedroom. Because the idea that you make music in your bedroom was still new enough that it was only relegated to people like, for example, like internet musicians and mostly that, or electronic musicians. So I remember like, being self-taught and at the time I was in Israel, and I remember like no one really understood what to do with that. So I remember just teaching myself for years and years and years until later when I decided to expose myself on YouTube and really see if people like whatever I'm trying to make in my own little world that I'm trying to make on the computer all the time. So. And
how did you nailed it in terms of like when you said when I decided to expose myself. Because that, you know what I mean? I mean, it's
what I mean. Yeah,
it sounds like I'm not even going for the joke. It sounds like a double entendre, but at the same time, that's what it is. That's what it is. Where I did that when I finally, was like, I'm just gonna. I've been an actor. That's a thing. You can be in a school play and stuff, but when you start doing stand up, it's like, what a dick. What are you doing up there? Get off the stage. You're holding a mic. Like this is not art. And I'm sure there was that thing where you're like, I have to now. Did you just when you started putting your music out there, was it that moment of just like, shit, okay, now there's no turning back?
It's kind of a both. And actually I got an interesting question for you and also for Sam. Because I used to make music, but mostly for just myself for many, many years. When I exposed myself again, like
love it.
when I exposed myself the first time on YouTube, I don't remember like necessarily having any kind of like, I was a little bit hesitant, but it was after years and years of just practicing with just myself. And I guess my question was, how long have you guys practiced with just yourself until you decided, okay, stand up time. My material is good shit. I can put it out there. Like, how long that took until you decided to come out there and do it?
I will say the first time I did an open mic, I'd already been an actor for like since I was a kid, and also I'd been doing improv, and I had I had like so it wasn't I lucked out, and then I had a real hot crowd. As I always say, the worst thing that could happen to a comic the first time happened to me, which is I killed. because then you just
Right.
think you're good and you're like, boy, this is easy. And then after that, you know, I ate my own dick for weeks and weeks and weeks. So, you know, it was this thing of like, oh, I think this is going to be you know, like so hard, but then it wasn't. But then, you know, it was in a sense. So there wasn't as much. I don't remember there's much being like I'm wringing my hands like, oh God, when. It kind of just happened. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, you know, I always loved comedy. Like I know a lot of kids went to sleep, you know, listening to music as a kid, but I always went to sleep like listening to comedy albums. Like I was probably like the only 9-year-old who had Woody Allen's The Moose memorized. Like I was just obsessed with like old comedy and you know, just like I voraciously consumed it. And I always liked it, but I never, you know, I feel like a lot of people, it takes them a while to think like, I could do this. I could work up the nerve and do this. And then one day I met a friend. Actually, I met a friend almost exactly the way I met Yoav. I met Yoav at a karaoke party.
Yes.
And yes.
Nice.
And I met this friend of mine, Tommy Kang. I'll give him a plug. He's a great comic in New York, and he's a phenomenal comic actor, like out of this world good. Okay. And I meet Tom. I go into a karaoke bar. I had just finished hanging out with my friends, and like this was, they went on the subway to go home, and I was like, oh, I'm in Koreatown right now. I'm gonna stop up and have a beer. And at the time, I had a habit of going into karaoke bars because I grew up in New York, and karaoke bars were the places that didn't card me when I was underage. I had since come of age, but it was a habit at this point that those were places that I drank. And so I go up, and there's this bartender who's like doing impressions and talking about comedy and just being kind of a comedy nerd. And I strike up a conversation with this guy, and it's Tommy. And we started just talking about comedy. And we were having just this engaged conversation about comedy in New York until like 6 or 7 in the morning.
Wow.
And at which point we were like, we need to go home. We need to get some sleep. But do you want to do an open mic tomorrow? And that's how it started.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. We both just kind of had to make a pact. Like, we got to stop just talking about this shit and just like try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, the one big takeaway I hope people get from this show, even we haven't even got to the calls yet, but I love how you guys have, you know, not only a real human friendship, but a natural enthusiasm for the stuff you do. Because
we bonded because we also share in common a lot of friends who think the same about like just like it's the big difference between, you know, being inspired by something and actually looking for it actively, like actually searching for material and actually searching for it, as opposed to just finding the right moment to strike you, and which is kind of like what led us to just find like-minded people this way, and niches as well. So, but you know.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. Yoav, maybe you wouldn't be as familiar with this, but I feel like there's that kind of joke that people make about the Mark Maron question, like, who are your guys? And in comedy, you always have your guys. You have your found family that like, these are the people who I'm starting to make my art with at the same time. Yeah. And you create this bond that is like, we share something that no one else shares, like this group of 4 or 5 people. Yeah.
My friend Dave Holmes, who he was a VJ on MTV 100 years ago, and he's a couple years older than me, but he's a writer now and a performer and stuff, and he's gay. And I remember he described to me the way he started finding not only his gay friends, but like kind of like his scene. Like the moment he did, it was like that scene in the Blind Lemon video where the little bee girl runs in the field and does all those bees. Like she spent the whole music video, and everyone's laughing at her because she's this little girl wearing a bee outfit for no reason. Then there's a field of bee people. Like it's, you know, that's kind of I'm like bludgeoning you with the metaphor, but I always think about that when I think about like when you find like quote unquote your people.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like that's, Yoav, like you were kind of saying that earlier, like the internet allows us to all find our B people.
Yeah. Especially since on the internet, it's a much more, it's weird. It's like you can find, I guess, common people more quickly, but it's most likely be people from different countries altogether.
Yes.
Which is why more than likely like you'll find someone you really relate to, but he's like in Finland and he's like, oh, so it's,
Yeah.
no, but yeah, I completely agree. It's and that's why it's important to know. Yeah, it's actively seeking for it, and I think it's also important to appreciate it because it's
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just like how you can't just have a friendship. You have to nurture it. You know,
Right,
you have
exactly.
I hate to say it, but everything takes at least a little bit of work. You know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
if you're at, I've had people my whole life who, when you see them, they're like, "Oh man, how have you been? I love you." Blah blah blah. And it's like, we don't really talk, man. I mean, I consider you a friend, but it's not like the way you're being so emotional right now. You're acting as if you have you're trying to make up for things.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and that's fine. We just don't talk that often, and it's not breaking my heart, but don't act like we talk all the time.
Oh,
You know what I
totally.
mean?
It's interesting that there is that almost that second class of close friend where
Sure.
you're like, oh, Dan, I fucking love Dan. And then I haven't talked to Dan in 2 years.
Of course. Yeah. And to be fair, there's also those friends you never talk to, but when you see them again, it's like it was yesterday you were around.
Right. Totally.
So it takes all kinds. So I always ask people when they're on the show, and I'll ask you individually, do you get asked advice from friends, from strangers, I know you have a huge internet reach. Do you get people asking you who are strangers?
Yeah, I often than not, it's people who are trying to, being the internet and all, they also, something to clarify is that a lot of fans like tend to, in a way, and I completely understand them. A lot of them like niche things, but it also puts them as being a bit like, they don't really know how to find themselves in the world, especially in the real world, where you have to deal with people you don't really relate to because they don't. For example, these bunnies in the back, like they're all from this franchise called Fandom Freddy's that I made songs about, and these are things that in the internet it's explosive. Everyone talks about it. Even Jack Black makes videos about them. But in the real world, like let's say if you go to school or something like that, you won't find people to really understand this the same way you do. And that's why sometimes these people come to me and they say, what should I do with what I do? Like, what should I do with what I love? And how do I make it so people know that I care about it? And I tell them, listen, when I started out, and I know I felt the same way, to me, I feel like the most important thing is first of all, just do it. Because sometimes you'll be surprised how much you need a talent and how much you need to work on things, because it helps you survive.
Yeah.
Often than not, when people start out and do these things, they are scared and they need something to survive, and that's why they need art to make this kind of stuff. Once you get to the process of finally you realize that what you are doing is really important and talent, at this point you're trying to relearn things. But once you get to that point, it's important to always remember that it's okay to do these things if you just need to feel like it's part of you and nothing else. It's hard, but
Right. Things that you need to do them for yourself. You don't need to do
Exactly.
them for the approval that everyone else is going to
Exactly, because that's like the advice everyone online gives. It's like, if you're gonna do it online, don't do it if you don't like it. You're gonna hate it very quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
always do it if you love it, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, I get approached for advice a lot. And I would say not for a specialized way, the way that Yoav is about like, oh, I have a passion and I want to create stuff. I feel like maybe I have participated in making this happen, but I feel like certainly I get looked at by some people I know as like the advice ombudsman, where it's like, what do I do about this? Oh, let me ask Sam. Let me talk to Sam about it. So I'm used to the advice giving thing. I'm hoping that it holds up when it's strangers.
Sure. Yeah, it's always different. I mean, I've asked so many people on the show, and I had people that were like Aparna Nancharla, who's like very, very sweet and nice. And
Totally.
She's like, yeah, I think people ask me because they know I'm not going to say anything mean. It varies.
Yeah.
You know? I think we all, if whether we're aware of it or not, we get asked, advice in different methodologies and forms. Whereas, I mean, generally there's something people, they want to hear something, and sometimes they'll ask you just to hear it. kind of thing. So I get
Yes.
some of those calls, but you never know. The great thing about this show is I don't hear them in advance.
Right.
Renee listens to the calls. I don't know what we're going to be wading through here. So,
Well, if
go ahead.
I'm sure you've said this at some point, but can I ask, like, because if you have, I haven't heard it. What drew you to giving advice? Are you that person for your friends where they're like, I got a question, I got to ask Matt?
Not really. It was just one of these things where I had a podcast called Ding Donger with Matt Braunger, and then I had people just start calling in and would ask me stuff, and I think it's just because I'm a pretty amiable guy. Like,
Right.
I'm like a fun uncle. So like I'm not gonna like dog on you too hard or anything. But and then the podcast turned into advice from a dipshit because I thought the name was funny, but it was almost like almost too strong
Right.
of a term, because it's like I had people listen. They're just like, you're not really giving dipshit advice. This is good advice. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm gonna treat it sincerely. I need to change the name again. So
Yeah.
here we are. But yeah, that was the evolution. It wasn't.
Wow.
I didn't really grow up with people asking me, advice. I had to kind of deep into adulthood start talking about my feelings, like going to therapy and being a lot more outward and less self-centered.
When did you start going to therapy?
Probably about 8 years ago, I think. So I started with a therapist that I didn't really connect with, and I was with her for a couple months. Then now the therapist I'm with now, I've been with for years.
Yeah, I feel like finding the right therapist, like you're just with them for as long as they'll have you.
Yeah, for sure. If you connect well. So, okay. Well, are you ready for the first call?
Yes.
Very excited.
Okay. Roll it, Renee.
Hey, Matt. First off, let me say that I'm a huge fan. On more than one occasion, your stand-up has gotten me through some dark times during this shit show fucking fire festival of a year. So thank you so much for that. I don't want to go on too long, so I'm just going to cut right to the chase. I live with my best friend. We've been friends since our freshman year of high school, and we're both now in our mid-20s, and we've been roommates for around 5 years. Now, this guy is one of the kindest, funniest people I know. He has the most infectious laugh ever, which makes him a perfect guest for like a show or comedy night or something like that. And I feel like we can talk to each other about almost anything except for one major thing, which is his weight. My friend has been considered to be obese for pretty much the entire time I've known him. But in recent years, I've just noticed him getting bigger and bigger. I don't know the exact measurements as far as like what he weighs, but I know that he wears a size 4XL shirt, possibly 5XL. He eats giant portions at every meal. He's been breathing heavier. And on top of that, I know it's taking a toll on his mental health too. He's been starting to keep to himself more lately. And so with COVID affecting heavier set people and COVID cases on the rise, I've never been more worried about his health. I'm just genuinely afraid of what might happen if he doesn't start making changes. But I don't want to bring it up and risk offending him and jeopardizing our friendship. So I guess my question is, how do I convince him to start losing weight without hurting his feelings? Any and all help is appreciated. Once again, I'm a huge fan, and just keep doing what you do, Matt. Thank you.
Dude, you sound like a hell of a person.
Yeah, it sounds
You sound like an
hard.
awesome person, and it's so hard, but you just gotta take the bull by the horns and I would say, like, let your vulnerability show, let your love for this person show, but just be like, man, I'll do anything you want if I can help you, but you got to start losing some weight. I'm really worried. And just talk about how you talk to us about COVID, if he's breathing heavy in the large portions. I'm thinking about comics I've known who would eat, like, it was really bad, where it was kind of like they would kind of just shovel it in, and it's that thing where it's just like, well, that's not sustenance, that's addiction. And it's really hard, and it's going to make him feel terrible. And it's that thing. It's the I'm not making a fat joke. It is the elephant in the room. It is the thing that is going to be like, he'll see it coming and he'll hear it halfway through the sentence. But if he dies and you haven't said anything, your life will be very hard, and I don't want that for you. So I'll let you guys take it from there. But that's my opinion.
I mean, I think it's important to approach something like this with a lot of sensitivity, because I'm sure like your roommate knows. You know, like you're not. I feel like a mistake that people fall into a lot is that they talk about stuff like this in like a very shamey way, in a way that they're like saying, hey, you know, it's actually been this way, when the person knows, like he's in his own body, living his own life. Like he knows what's going on. I would say, if it seems like he's like really getting just like depressed and down about himself, like you need to talk to him in a way that is coming from a place of trust, not coming from a place of authority. Because if you're coming from a place of like, listen, you're going to make yourself sick and you got to lose weight because you're not going to be healthy. Like first of all, I think there are studies that show that like that's really bad at helping people lose weight. And it's just important that like your roommate has to know it and want it too, because if you're putting this on him as an authority, like that's just going to be more unhealthiness for him, and then all of a sudden he's going to be dealing with more stress in his daily life, and like stress is a killer. So it's really important to deal with this from a place of sensitivity, and in a place that's like productive, and not acting condescending, like I know something you don't know about your own body and the way that you need to conduct your life.
I think like in general, as long as it comes from a place of understanding, and if weight is not the thing he wants to talk about, then I agree that it should probably come from an angle of, you know, if you don't want to talk about that, I get it, but I know that usually, like, I just worry about you because it seems like this comes from an act of feeling depressed or feeling like there's something about you that you're trying to combat. Because if it's not that, then we need to understand, like, why is it that like this, you probably feel a certain way, and I can see that. You don't need to talk about this. What you have to understand that I can still see that you're acting some way. It's like, if it's not this, you could be scratching your hand, for all I know.
Right. The root of this guy's pain is not that he's overweight. It sounds like he's overeating because he's in pain. Yeah. So I think it's important to make it like you're taking stock of everything. Like, take a holistic approach. Like, what's going on in life? Talk to me about, are you hurting?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
We're stuck here together. Let's help each other.
Yeah.
You know, I have neighbors who I'm like, you know, I hate to say it, but I'll see them after I haven't seen them in weeks, and I'm like, whoa, God, you blew up, man. You know, I wouldn't say it to them, but I'm kind of not that it makes me concerned necessarily, but that's very de rigueur right now. A lot of people are gaining a lot of weight, so he's certainly not alone. That is happening everywhere. Food is ultimate. It's the ultimate comfort, I would say. You know, outside of human comfort, it's number one. Booze is probably number two, but like food is, you know,
for a lot of people, food is the only vice we really have access to right now as well. Like, it reliably so, because, you know, booze, below a certain point of dependence on it, you're probably not just at home cracking open a bottle of whiskey by yourself. Exactly. So food it's non-social. You have to eat every day to stay alive. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy for it to become a thing that you rely on. And it's, you know, I don't even know if there's anything wrong with relying on food emotionally at times, but I think,
of course not.
You know, like I have major depression, and like I go through phases where my relationship to food is like really fucked up. Sure. And I think it's never a food problem. It's always like, I'm really depressed right now, and I need to do something about the depression to fix that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, food heals. But
and you also gotta remember that, like, there's different kinds of thinking about what kind of do you want from food that you're craving, because technically there's a lot of sugar in everything.
Yeah.
And it's enough that you eat, like there's always a stereotype of eating dessert, like eating like ice cream in order to feed off depression. And the thing is that, these things in food like are the really, I think, I mean, that's as far as I understand it, could be the thing that most people really think about when it comes to just gobbling a lot of up, because it means that you're getting a lot of things that taste good, but in abundance, and it's also cheap. So it's like it's really easy to think in that sort of situation. But in general, like I think like yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, you guys nailed it. It's I'll just say to the caller, just make sure you talk to your roommate and from a position of love and understanding, but make sure you do, and don't worry so much about hurting his feelings. They're gonna get hurt on a certain level, but you love the guy, so it's not gonna come from a bad place. So, we got a heavy one.
First
call
right out of the gate.
Man,
yeah,
went real dark. So let's let's see what number 2 is. Roll it. Folks, we got a perfect sponsor this week. This Might Help with Matt Braunger is brought to you by BetterHelp.com. Help and help. Yeah. BetterHelp.com helps you find a therapist, real actual therapist, actual licensed professional counselors, all right, you can start communicating with in under 24 hours. You can send a message to your counselor anytime. You get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid, ding, is available. It's available for clients worldwide. So what you should do is go to betterhelp.com/MattB. You get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com. Just make sure you put in /MattB. They can help you with depression, stress, anxiety, anger, family conflicts, LGBT matters, grief, self-esteem, what have you. betterhelp.com/MattB. Go now.
I had a question for Matt Braunger, the Living Tombstone band, and Brent Terhune. Oh, I probably just fucked that up. Do comedians mind when people tell them silly stories just to make them laugh with no other alternative means? And do comedians mind that we use your phrases or tell your jokes to let people know about you? This is Nervous Nick. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Nervous Nick. Well, and let me because I started off on that last one, but he did say comedians. But like, do you guys get people talking about music to you, or video games even, and or reference your shit to you, and does it bug you?
I don't think it doesn't bug me at all to get our stuff referenced to me. I appreciate when someone has something else to say, because ultimately, like we're just people, right? Like we're not characters, and so it's not like our whole existence is not around being TLT. Like we're just guys, and we don't want to. I feel like it's almost like a very celebrity reaction of just like, hey, remember this thing you did? Yeah. And like, it's very cool. And it really is heartwarming to hear from people like, hey, this piece of art you made like is really meaningful to me and I like it a lot. But like, also we want to engage with you and know you. And if you're referencing us to us, then really our only point of reference in a conversation is us. And we'd like to know you too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, referencing, I was thinking more of the sense that there's a lot of memes that were popping up of like our stuff, and sometimes they would like reference whatever a thing that popped from a song that we've done. And but yeah, I think like in general, well, it really depends. It's like sometimes people get to ask us questions about what the songs mean and stuff, especially since the last album was like full of stuff that was very easy to interpret as, is it about us or is it about the character we made? And then we need to explain that. But in general, like it never, I don't know, from the perspective of enjoying the fact that people just love reacting to our stuff, like this is fun to see people, like I said, meme or not. But I also agree with Sam. Like, if you only talk about us, then we don't really have anywhere to go with this. Because then it's like, well, it's awesome, but it seems to me that you want to talk about us because there's something about you that you want to say about us, and let's go from there. That would be actually nicer if we could do that.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of people just telling me funny stories because I'm a comedian, it happens sometimes. I never got the correlation where it's like, you're a comedian, you love jokes, here's some. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm around them all the time, and it's not like I need, to necessarily hear your story. But that said, if someone's telling me something funny, then that's great. Not necessarily like from the perspective of the stereotype would be the older relative. There's like, oh, you're a comic, you'll love this.
Yes.
Here, take this joke and use it. And it's just a garbage, semi-racist story from some guy.
Totally.
But when someone's like references a joke I've said and yells it or whatever, that's typically fine. I will say, longtime listeners of my stuff, or people who are aware of my jokes, they know I have a bit called "F You Peaches." That was this time it's a story about the time my now wife and I got drunk and stoned and went to a bar, and bingo was happening, and I was just way out, zonked, and I took a bingo card and won right away. Like I won the next 5 things, and I yelled bingo, and everyone's like, "Wow!" and they're angry because I guess it had been going on a long time. And I stood up and I had a T-shirt on from a record store in New Orleans called Peaches Records, and this woman just yells, "Fuck you, Peaches!" and I forgot I had it on. And so I was like, why am I Peaches? And like I got in my head, and like this whole place hates me.
Yeah.
But, so I've had people yell "fuck you, Peaches" at me all over the country, and once across an IKEA. Like it's one of those things where I it's not as bad as like when Dave Chappelle did I'm Rick James bitch. People were yelling it at him when he was at Disneyland with his kid.
Yeah.
You would not call me a bitch in front of my kid, but it is someone yelling "fuck you." So 99% of the time it was like, hilarious. But there's that 1% where I'm like, hey, don't yell that in my face. Yeah, I will say, like the worst I've seen is I did a festival in Telluride, Colorado, and Jason Mantzoukas was there, and he plays a maniac on what's that damn show where they play fantasy football? Nick Kroll's on it.
Oh, yeah, The League.
The League, thank you. I know
yes.
Guys. Like,
yeah.
What the fuck? So, and these drunk dudes keep yelling his lines in his face.
Oh my God.
And Jason is going, but I don't like that, man. I don't like that. And the kid's like, what, dude? Be cool, man. Because they're all just housed.
Yeah.
So it's like they're, in answer to, do we like it? Most of the time. But there's that every once in a while where it's just like, no, please stop yelling my joke in my face.
Yeah.
But I will say, literally 95% of the time, it's been awesome. When Biden won, I was in Louisiana, I was in New Orleans, and this guy came out of a bar or a restaurant with his kid and was like a little bit buzzed and was like, hey man, are you Matt Braunger? Your joke, blah, blah, blah. I love it. Just want to say, sorry to bug you. And like walked away, and I was like, that was magical.
That's so nice.
Yeah, it was the coolest. As if this day wasn't already the best.
I will say, I feel like I had the best possible version of that with, I had an ex-girlfriend, and I was meeting her parents for the first time at dinner, and our server came up to us and was like, hey, Sam, I saw you on stage 2 days ago. This guy's so funny. And I was like, because there could not be better timing for that.
You validated me.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So cool. Thanks, caller. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we got one more. We ready?
One more.
Okay. Roll it, Renee.
Hello. Sorry for whispering. I'm trying not to wake my sleeping baby. I guess I was wondering, my mom spent about 10 years dying of Alzheimer's, and it fucking sucked, as you'd expect. And, she died 2 years ago. I'm in my mid-30s, so it was kind of early onset. And my dad has kind of just been a swirling morass of, bitterness since then. It's not like they were, Hollywood lovey-dovey, but they had kind of come to an understanding and taking care of somebody with dementia, especially when you know them and love them, fucking sucks. And he's a boomer, so he refused to accept help, either, in home or therapy for himself, which, how can you not need it? Anyway, he's in he's not a dumb guy. You know, he knows to wear his mask. He knows to respect pandemic situations to be what they are. But he's falling into lately this kind of glorifying in the shittiness of the world, like saying, haha, I told you so when things go shitty politically, or when, you know, despite everybody's best interests, you know, shit gets worse, whether you're talking about the virus or, I don't know, global unrest. And, you know, I thought, certainly I didn't have a child to cheer him up, but I thought a grandson might be, you know, cheering for him the way it kind of is for a lot of people. And I mean, yeah, sure, he likes seeing his grandkid, but it's not enough to kind of pull him out of it. And he just won't kind of, you know, there's online dating, there's, you know, he has tons of hobbies, but he's just kind of bitter. And it's frustrating for me thinking, you know, when my kid, he's only one, but when my kid's old enough to hang out with him, Grandpa's going to be this swirling murk of bitterness and frustration, and I don't know how to make him more of a dad I knew growing up, you know, who would joke and you know, make hilarious comments and insightful stuff too. I don't know how to get that guy back, and I totally get that he's wrecked by the loss of my mom. I mean, our family in general was kind of wrecked by that. But it'd be nice to recognize him again, and I don't know how to get through to somebody of his age, but also self-regard. So, yeah, if you have any ideas on how to get through to boomers, that'd be great. Thanks.
Goddamn boomers. Yeah, thanks for calling first off. And that's awful. And sorry to hear about your mom. But, you know, here's the thing. Two things. One, I don't know if you can change him, but all you can do is be honest and try. And since this guy seems to love giving people the raw deal, and I've known a lot of people like that, I've had friends like that who are just like, yeah, but it sucks anyway, so fucking who cares? And like, I get it. I get where he's coming from with that. He lost, you know, his wife. I would be an angry person if that happened to me. I'm sure I would be far more negative than I am. At the same time, you can kind of just be straight up with him, because you sound like you sound like you've got a lot of sympathy for him, which you should, but you lived through that too. That was your mom. Like that, you have a connection to that person that he could never understand. And so you have ground to stand on to turn to him and go, look, you're being a cock. You're not making it, I won't even say easier. You're making it hard. Making it hard for me, hard for my kid. I love you to death, but fuck off. You know, you know, don't use these words, please. This is not verbatim, but that's the feeling behind it, where it's like, I love you so much, but you're not doing right by us, and you're not certainly not doing right by yourself. You're not wrong. Everything is on fire. That's true. But at the same time, we have to make the best of it, and we need each other. So it's tough. I get it. I you know, like I said, it might not work, but that's okay, because at least with this situation, you know, like the guy who called before with his roommate, he feels this person slipping away, and it's this thing where you have to approach it with as much vulnerability as you can, and with this, use the vulnerability too, but at the same time, I think you can go a little harder, because I think he'll appreciate that. I'm not talking scream in his face, but just lay out the facts. Just, you know, I've had to talk to friends who have been exhaustingly negative, where I'm just like, you just make it harder. You make me tired, because all you say are negative things. And I know that's satisfying for you in a weird way. It's for all of us. It's very easy to be like, what's the point? Then it fucking everything sucks. Yeah, okay, but at the same time, where does that leave us? So
Totally.
I kind of went all over the place there, but I think you get where I'm coming from. I'll pass the baton.
Okay.
You guys.
I have a lot of thoughts about this one.
Just share one. I'm kidding.
Yes.
I'm joking.
Well,
one
of
as
them.
Many as you want.
Okay. One of them is I think it would be good to get him near a therapist. And it's very, very hard to get people of a certain age to therapy. But I think exactly what you were talking about, Matt, like this is something that happened to you too. And I think maybe a way to approach therapy is to say, I want to talk to a counselor about what happened with mom. Will you come with me?
Yeah, great idea.
And I think that's a way to get you both in an open dialogue about it, to get you to process grief a little more, and to do it in front of each other and kind of unmuddy those lines of communication. Because it's like, it feels like there's this kind of this mental block of like, anytime there is hope, because I have faced so much sorrow, it's like, why have hope? Who gives a shit?
Right.
So I think processing through the grief a little bit to let you see the light on the other side and let you, in a therapeutic session, process those feelings and learn to kind of count your blessings and whatnot. But also, like, he's not gonna be the same dad to your kid that he was to you. I feel like, speaking as another person with a young kid, like our parents never treat our kids the way they're going to treat us. It's just, it's always, it's going to be more to one side or the other. And I think a big part of that is like, they feel like they've learned something in raising us, or they feel like they made some mistakes, or they simply have like rose-colored glasses on how they were as parents. And they're just going to act the way they thought they were a parent, as opposed to the way they actually were a parent.
Right.
And I would not expect that from him. And then the last thing that occurred to me is that also a generational thing. Although I feel like I relate to this feeling very much. I personally feel like retirement is impossible. I feel like the idea of not doing anything anymore fills me with, like, that feels like death more than death does.
Yeah.
That feels like the end. And I saw it with my grandfather when he passed away. Like, he got, you know, he was having health problems, and then eventually it was like, oh, well, for the good of his health, maybe he should stop working. And like, that was the tipping point. And then like, he just went off and died soon after. So I feel like it is important for people to still feel like they have a purpose. And there are some people in that generation who are really good at being rudderless, who would just like go to the fucking villages and play golf for the rest of their life, and like, they're happy with that. There are a lot of people who aren't. And I think a big part of that is like I'm Jewish, but the American Protestant kind of like bootstraps individualism, work for every dollar you have to put the food on the table thing. And like, you feel like you are worth nothing if you are not doing something productive. And to that end, I would say a really simple suggestion is like, see if you can get him a dog. Having a thing like, as much as it might feel counterintuitive to like, the last thing this man needs is to take care of another living thing, that's probably exactly what he needs. I feel like
he needs a connection.
I think
your point.
I think I completely agree with what you said in the beginning, Sam. Like, maybe just getting him, or just, I think like, it's something you both said, like, regarding just making sure that he has consultation or something that they can talk to. And nowadays, because of how everyone's stuck at home, you can just initiate through Zoom. It's much more comfortable to do it from home.
Yeah.
So that way he doesn't need to feel like this is going into a different room, different place, and I feel like he needs to be questioned. Because if there's something I do agree, is that the problem right now with an older generation is that they're stuck longer with a specific mentality than we have. So for us to undo certain thoughts and ideas that were wrong is easier, because we were living in such a generation that we are used to the internet, as opposed to like another generation that now has to deal with it for way longer. And now suddenly they're told they're wrong, and to think that differently, even if they are wrong, to suddenly know this after 60 years of living, and then suddenly telling you, hey, you're wrong about stuff. You're like,
oh,
no.
totally.
And I get that. So there is like a lot of entanglement when it comes to just understanding that. And the whole idea of being a rose-colored, glasses. Basically, the point is that if they think they were good parents, and now their views shattered, like, I get that. So I guess like, I agree that having like some counseling with someone through Zoom and just make it very casual, very simple, would probably be the best idea.
And I think, as an adult past a certain age, you really don't have those. I feel like there's a window where you have a lot of real like heart to hearts with your parents. And it's like above a certain age where you can have deep introspective conversations, but below a certain age, before you go off and like live your life as an individual adult. So I feel like it's probably rare that you and your father may have conversations where you're getting deep in the same way where you're like, let me tell you how it ripped my life in half when mom died.
I mean, that's why I was kind of leaning on the angle of you got to go hard.
Yeah.
Because it's just, he's not going to understand, or he's not going to take you seriously unless you do. Not even, like I said, don't yell in his face, but just be like, look, I'm just going to lay it out, Dad. I love you. Your idea of counseling is great, but if he does the thing where he's like, just withdraws and is like, that's not for me, then be like, all right, Dad, well, let me tell you this too. This thing that, just let him sit with it a minute, and not in an accusatory way. Not like, you son of a bitch, you're so negative. Right. Nothing like that, but just I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, explain the hardship that
you're making it tough.
Exactly. Because it's like, it's one thing to think this only, because sometimes, people are like that just to themselves because I think it doesn't necessarily bother that many people outside. And you have to just explain to them, listen, I get it, but it hurts me.
Yeah.
Because in the end of the day, I can't, like, you have to understand that with everything going on, and possibly mentioning the fact that COVID is going on is also important, because in the end of the day, you're already dealing with it, in different degrees, but now with COVID and on top of it with everything else, you got to understand. So I agree with going hard is helping.
Just being straight up and honest.
Totally. It's, if you start from a place of how you were hurt, it might help him learn how to find the words to talk about how he is hurt. And beyond that, like, it might also activate that kind of like parent, it might flip the parent switch back on where he's like, oh, I need to be daddy again. Like,
I think Yoav, we all made amazing points, but I think Yoav really nailed it, because we said, it hurts me. Because that I think is going to lay the seed in his heart where he's like, fuck, where it's that thing where you can be all day long, like, it's frustrating, Dad, you tire me out. But if you just kind of lay that out, like, look, man, it hurts me the way you've been. And that would make, I have a daughter, and like, if my daughter grew up and said that to me, I would be destroyed.
Oh yeah.
So like, just like anyone who has someone that they love on that level, if you said that to them. So, I think it's amazing. We had two pretty fucking heavy ones.
Oh yeah.
Let's be honest. This is great. Did you guys have fun?
Oh I had a ton of fun.
Awesome. Before you go, is there anything you want to plug at all?
Oh hell yeah.
Check out?
Yeah, it would be great if you could check out our album, listeners. Our album is called 01. It's 0_1 spelled out, ZEROONE.
Nice.
We're the Living Tombstone. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. We post mainly, our hub of content is YouTube, but you can follow us. We're Living Tombstone on Twitter. Also, let me just think of our social. I think we're like the Living Tombstone official or something on Facebook, because someone else took Living Tombstone.
Actually, the reason is that at the time everyone says Skrillex did Skrillex official. You should do the Living Tombstone official, without thinking that no one used that. Never mind.
Oh yeah,
it's dumb.
I mean, it's like, it's not to tangent super hard, but it's like how it's how completely stupid it is that like the president's Twitter handle is real Donald Trump. Like, no, I'm the guy. Trust me, official.
One of my favorites though is when someone like
sounds like an Xbox gamer tag name.
When someone like lights in on me on Twitter for something I said, and I look and they're the real someone, and they have like 9 followers.
Yeah,
like, oh, you're the real one. They just put real on there to try to be big or famous. That's quality.
I love that. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again, guys, for coming on. This was a blast getting to know you, and you guys really you helped. You really
Thank you.
So appreciate it, guys.
That was awesome.
It feels good to help, and if you're watching this, go help people. It feels good.
Yeah. Fuck it.
Yeah. If you can give advice and it's good advice,
stick your nose in people's business.
Why not?
Advice is free. Give it.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to This Might Help. If you need any advice, no matter how serious or stupid, call 323-763-0228. Again, that's 323-763-0228. And thanks.
This Might Help with Matt Braunger was created and hosted by me, Matt Braunger. Produced by Outer Circle Media. Executive producers Matt Kleinschmidt and Robert Kelly for the Laugh Button Podcasts.